I'm David Perry. I'm developer advocate, and with me today is Jonathan Click. He is a solutions engineer. We're both from CodiumAI, and we will be going through some questions. Any questions you guys have, we'll try to answer them either live or through the chat, or we'll get back to you too. So we want to make sure that we're very cognizant that we don't just try to answer your question. If if you got us stumped or we might not have the information, we will eventually get that back and get that to you. Is there any other kind of no, I think that's it. We have questions and answers, so you can ask the QA. I believe you can chat with us. The last time I trying
Yeah,
to make sure to
the
see if
chat
you
is
guys can chat.
enabled. Yeah, the chat is
Yeah,
enabled. You can chat with us if you chat with host and pin us. It's not open to like communicate with everybody on the meeting. Unfortunately, I don't think
yeah.
we have the ability to change that right now. But like otherwise, if you need to communicate directly to us in not a question format, feel free to hit us up. Like if I have something stuck in my teeth, or if you can't hear me or something like that, feel free to call it out.
Yeah, that's a really good one. So if we really are doing bad, please, please tell us, and that's a good segue into what the chat's for versus what the Q&A is for. So we like to be able to make sure. So great.
One of the questions that we're seeing already like is like, what's Codium AI? Just need kind of like quick heads up. So the focus today, first of all, is actually to kind of get you up to speed with what the product can do. In fact, if you don't have the product already up and running, you can go to the URL that you see up here. You can go and download it. Comes as a VS Code extension or a JetBrains extension. You can go to the respective marketplaces and download it that way. And you can even follow along as we do things today. It's going to be very interactive. So let me go ahead and give you a quick overview of what we're about. So to begin with, the way that we're kind of looking at the world right now, we see that a lot of the AI-based dev tools on the market are very heavily focused on writing code. And that's good. It actually helps make us more productive, hopefully. In some cases, maybe not so much when it gives us bad recommendations or hallucinates. But the reality is that what we want to do is focus a little bit more on all the other things that are involved in kind of getting code out into production. This includes writing tests for code, preparing the PR, reviewing the PR, and so forth. There's so much more that goes into that. And in fact, because of that, while we will talk about like writing code with our product and so forth, we're going to talk about a lot of these other pieces. We want to talk about code quality. We want to talk about not just coding faster, but actually having a higher quality level of code, being able to do so with less bugs. And a lot of those things fall into some of those categories that we mentioned, like reviewing code more successfully, testing code, and so forth. We're going to do this within the context of two different products that we have available today. We're going to be talking about Codium 8, which is our IDE extension. So supports all the JetBrains IDEs. It supports VS Code. If any of you today are like using Vim or Eclipse or just Visual Studio Vanilla, in those sorts of situations, we don't support those quite yet today. However, we are working on support for other IDEs in the future. The other piece that we're going to be talking about is PR Agent. This is a tool that kind of sits side by side with your GitHub repos, or not just your GitHub repos, but your Git repos in general, and supports like GitHub, GitLab, Azure DevOps, Bitbucket, and so forth. So for the most part, most any of you who are using Git repos today, we will probably support the repo the types of repos that you're using, because we're pretty versatile in that regard. Now, for the purposes of the webinar today, we're going to be going through a kind of a flow, if you will. So we're going to start with kind of using our product to learn about code, build code, polish that code, and then finally finalize that code and ship it off to be reviewed. And you'll see that a vast majority of those functions will fall into the Codium 8 category. We'll be in the IDE. We'll be using VS Code today as an example. And while we do support pretty much any language you can think of, I just happen to be a Python person, so I'll largely be using Python. But but most anything that I show you today is likewise available in every language, and then also once again available across the JetBrains IDEs as well. So with that said, without further ado, I guess let's dive into this And I guess, David, as you have thoughts, feel free to throw them out there. I might ask you a couple of questions as well. Just for context, David is not just a Codium AI employee. He actually was a customer of ours before joining the company. So that might indicate that maybe he likes the product, maybe he finds it helpful. Uh, and so he'll be able to share things. Oh my goodness. Everyone's really catering to David here. They're asking, is Flutter supported? And do we support a TDD workflow? These are all things that are like David's jam. So we'll talk about that a bit more as we get those respective parts.
And based on time, if you want, I can actually share some examples of this too.
Oh yeah, yeah. If we fly through this, let's definitely share some of those other like kind of custom examples for some really exciting things we can do there. So let's go ahead. I'm going to switch screens here. I'm going to flip over to VS Code for a moment. And with the VS Code extension, one of the things you're going to note is on the left side here, right out of the gate, there is a chat panel. You can open and close that. You can use this to kind of be your personal chat GPT with all sorts of things. We'll talk about that in a moment. And in fact, as an example of this, you have the ability, if you go ahead and select a focus. So this could be any sort of file or folder that you might have. So in this case, I'm going to select the current file. And one of the beauties, one of the things a lot of our customers like about using our product when they're interacting with it is the ability to kind of tailor that context. So while I am focused on this file, I have the ability within this file to focus on a class, on a method, on a function. I can really kind of zoom in the focus, so to speak, or expand that focus depending on what I'm trying to accomplish. And then likewise, a lot of times the code I'm working on is it's much more diverse than say a single file, right? I've got a single file that's interacting with other components and files and classes and so forth. And so I also have the ability to be able to add in additional context. So in this case, I could add an additional file or folder, which could again be like a file that I have opened up in a tab or recently opened, or I could even select the entire project, which is very helpful because if I'm working with an artificial intelligence and part of the context that I have, some of the things I'm trying to accomplish might involve actually using many different files. So I'm going to go ahead and add that in as well. Now, when I do that, let's use that first example, which is really kind of learning about the code that we're working with. Sometimes we're working with code we didn't build. Another developer built it years ago, and now we're going in and editing it or improving it or fixing a bug. Or actually, David, I mean, you use this even, if I recall correctly, you even use this in helping to kind of adapt to even a new language, one that you weren't familiar with, right? Does that sound accurate?
Yeah. So I did it actually for Python. So when I was doing the cover agent, I've dabbled and I've written in Python, but I really, I'm not a everyday writing of Python. So I consider myself a polyglot, but using this agent, it just helps you get the syntax close and being close enough to be able to drive forward and keep on moving and get some input on like, hey, you probably shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do that loop is a good one. So
So let's actually do an example of this. So if when I hit the slash command or the slash key, you'll notice that it brings up a whole list of commands. We'll talk about several of these as we go through. The one I'm going to focus on right now is this explain, right? So I can, again, I'm selecting context, I'm selecting certain methods or classes or functions, and I can go ahead and have it explain that code to me. Also, it's worth noting that I have very similar functionality right in the tops of methods and classes. So I go ahead and click on CodiumAI options right above that, and you'll notice a variety of commands appear in which I can execute those commands directly from within here as well. So you've got a couple of different ways to explore that. In the example here, by the way, it goes through and explains the code to me. It actually gives me an example of how that code would be used. It breaks down kind of the functionalities and steps within a particular function. And then also goes ahead and gives me a list of other methods, fields, and so forth. It really kind of helps me to understand a bit more about what it is that I'm looking at. And of course, in many cases, that's like the first step in which I would need to pursue in order to be able to begin working with something would be understanding what it is that I am working with. The other part that I just note here is we're really big on kind of showing our work, right? So as an example of this, it's talking to me about what files in the project and what lines of code are actually being referenced and being able to generate this sort of response to kind of show me that like there are other files, there are other lines of code that are being looked at in order to be able to do this and helping me to actually learn a bit more about the code base that I'm working with in the meanwhile. But that's really kind of the entry part, right? Just understanding the code. Where we start really kind of start getting the meat of things is when we're building code. And there's a few different ways that we can approach this. One way is that right within the code itself. So if I go in, for example, I'm going to add in another method here. So this is an API wrapper. And so if I go in and say like, I want to add in a method to, let's see, get a collection by title. The idea is that what we're doing, because this is a generative AI solution in the background, it's just kind of if it's looking at your comments, it's looking at kind of the names of your functions and variables to kind of discern what it is that you're trying to do. And you'll see, by the way, it's kind of giving me suggestions on what it is that it's recommending that I do. And so I'm just going to kind of follow this for a moment and see where it leads me. It's building out kind of a doc string, and then in the end, it has now completed an entire new method for me. It looked at the code base and it understood kind of, and also from here understood what I was trying to accomplish. And now it's gone off and created a new method for me that allows me to accomplish what I'm looking for. Now that's one way, is kind of in line while I'm coding. If I pause for a moment, it starts to give suggestions. Another way is simply by using the box here. So if I wanted to, I could say like, we'll just go ahead and like remove this for a moment, pretend we didn't build that. And what I can do is I can come in here and say help me create a new method um, that finds collections by name. Now, additionally, I could do something slightly different from this. In fact, I could use this for even refactoring, for example. So, like, I could say, help me build this function or method, but in Java, which probably makes David really happy because then he's like, yes, Java is so much better than Python. But the idea is that what this has now done for me is gone through and actually built out the entire code. I can review that code. I can then copy this code to my clipboard or insert it. And I can even continue this chat. So I could go and say, like, actually, I want to do something more like this. And I could thread a conversation and iterate back and forth with the product to be able to accomplish that objective. So that's really kind of the starting point here. One of the other things I could show, because like someone mentioned Flutter, um, and uh, and I know that David, you'd done some work as well with that in the past. Do you have an example you could share around that? Kind of like to kind of pull. I don't know if you have that ready or if I'm putting you out on the spot.
Nah, I do have something I can show. Again, I take this, if you want to, I can go ahead and share my desktop here,
Yeah, go ahead
and
and do that. I'll stop sharing for a
or
moment. And
I'll share my, yep.
by the way, this is what he's going to share here isn't exclusive to Flutter. He just happens to have an example. But the idea here is when we're asking the product, the chat box to build code, you can actually even supply images and upload images to the product and say like, here's a mock-up of what I'm trying to build, and it will actually build code off of that. This is really cool. So David, I'll give you a moment to kind of show how that would work.
Yeah, and I think this answers, sir, there was a question in there that do we support Flutter and Dart language? And I would say that in our test, right here, in our test coding, we make tests. We don't have the testing framework that comes with Flutter and Dart to generate. So the very homed in tests that we can generate, we're not supporting that yet. But in general, you'll see that you can do this and get the support. So right now, if everyone who knows iOS or Android, it doesn't matter. This is Dart Flutter that will run in them and even in the web. And if you're familiar with this is, can everyone see that? You see I'm clicking the button, and this is kind of like the home basic demo that you get with the Flutter. We have the one main file and the main Dart. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just clear this, and I'm going to pick a file. So think of, you have some kind of diagram, something that's saying this is what I want to accomplish. So now you'll see that I just have that image, and all I'm going to say is create the Flutter application. Now, what's nice about this is you're still in the driver's seat. So we're going to get the code, and I'm going to take all of it and I'm going to paste it in, and we're going to have to restart the app because it's the whole complete redone. But you'll see that this is really nice starter for you, and to see the logic and to get the code going. And you'll see how, yes, we can understand the Dart language and the Flutter language and be able to access that and get those examples. So right there is, I have that whole output, and you can read about this and take in the steps about doing your Dart and replacing your main Dart. So that's what I'm going to do. So I just selected the whole file, and then I'm going to come here and insert. So that's going to overwrite this. Now, the problem is, as you guys probably know, this is not going to hot load. I'll get an error, as you guys can see, because I changed out the whole app. So I just restart this, and we will see, and I'll try to make it bigger now. You guys can see that a little bit bigger, and it's starting, and we will see. Now I will click on the button, and you'll see the different colors. Now, you guys saw, I just cut and pasted. Now it's up to you to like, oh, well, look, this task, there's a lot, like you should use a constant modifier. There's other things that you can keep on doing. So again, as yourself in the driver's seat, we're not taking you away, we're enhancing you. So that was a lot easier for me to get something started, and then you can iterate over on it. Now, the next step I can do here is I can continuous chat and say, well, you know what? I wanted it to automatically change color after, say, 5 seconds if the button was not clicked. And now I'm going to go ahead and wait for CodiumAI to write this out, and it'll tell me that, hey, look, you're going to do async, as we know, and the change color method, and go ahead and create the timer. So we know the timer's on the isolate. So if you guys are all Dart programmers, you know about the isolates and time. It's already doing that for us. So we're going to go ahead and insert this. Now, I do not believe it's going to do that, but maybe. Yeah, it's not going to. So you'll see, you think it's going to change, it won't. I have to restart it.
No worries. I think what's important
This
here,
isn't,
though,
yeah.
I think what's important here, though, is like we're using Flutter as an example, but like any of you other people who are generating UIs in other ways, whether it's like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React Native is popular for mobile development, things like that. Like you could have easily just said like indicated a different language or framework besides Flutter to be able to do things like that. Anyway, I was kind of giddy when I first saw this, like just kind of dropping in an image and it kind of like creating kind of like template code. And so I figured that would be something you guys might find pretty exciting.
Yep. And I think the big thing is, you guys can see it change the color now, is you can continue the conversation, or you can keep on iterating over on this. So I think the big deal is the iterating over your solutions and working with the CodiumAI to come up with your solution. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing there and let you get back to it.
Sure. And so to kind of wrap up the section on kind of build, the other thing I would just note here is just in general, this free-form chat box that can capture many of the other things you might need. We talked about context earlier and how context could be like all the project files, and we index those files locally. right at the IDE level, right on your system, so that like you can now use that whole local repo that you've cloned locally as context. And that's valuable. However, one of the other things that we're offering with our enterprise with enterprise licensing is the ability to also do what's called multi-repo RAG. So in other words, where we can actually index repositories and store it in a database on your company network that allows us to be able to turn this into like your company chat GPT. Let me give you an example. We're actually indexing our internal code repositories. I was playing with this recently. A customer asked me like, hey, can you index XLSX files, which was really kind of weird. Like to me, I was thinking like, you have Excel files in your Git repos. I guess that works. And so and I said, I don't know. And in fact, I found out that we couldn't. And so I was curious, like, is this something where me, as not the engineer on this product could actually go ahead and submit a PR to be able to fix this? And so I just asked a plain and simple question that said, like, how do I support or how do I add support for XLSX files in our RAG indexer? So this is something where I don't even know which repo this would be in or what code files. And what it did is help me to really kind of understand our code base a lot better, where now what it's doing is telling me exactly what parts of the code base are being used. And then also giving me the code suggestions and whatnot. And so this was an incredibly helpful thing for me in being able to kind of, again, learn our code base as well as get suggestions on how I would go about doing that and if that would be something that would be hard to do. Now, the other part of this, though, that's really important is now we've kind of built things, right? Is how do we go about, I guess, polishing that code before we ship it off, right? We need to make sure this code is of good quality. And there's a few different things we can do. One would be the ability to be able to add doc strings. As an example of this, I can go ahead and, again, I'll select the current file. Maybe I'll select like a certain method. I'll select this one. And I'm just going to do a doc string command. And as part of that, then this will go off and be able to generate doc strings. Now, I have the ability to send additional information with that command. I could have said, like, give it to me in a certain format. Like for Python, you've got kind of a REST format, you've got the Google format. There's different ways to structure doc strings. And so in this case, being able to even recommend what kind of structure I want for that. Another way to polish code and to kind of actually review your code is a command here that's called improve. So if I was to go ahead, I'm just going to select the broader class here, and I'm going to go ahead and give an improve command. What improve does is it takes a look at the code that's in focus and gives you recommendations on how you could make that better. This could range from performance to security to maintainability, duplication of code, really a wide variety of things. Let's kind of talk about an example real quick. And in fact, in a moment, David, when I'm done talk about this, I'd be curious if there's any particular types of examples that stand out to you that you've seen in the past of ways that like improve kind of has been like a highlight. But to kind of give you an example here, so like I'm seeing actually a potential security issue here. I'm seeing some other situations that are kind of more best practice, and maybe even a performance one here. Now, if I see suggestions that I like, not only can I get additional details on like why this is being recommended, I can even preview the code of what's being recommended in a diff format to show me how it would actually go about changing that code. So if I was to go, for example, and select maybe one or more of these checkboxes and click prepare code changes, it takes all of those changes and puts them into a single diff file that I can then go ahead and review and edit and whatnot before applying those changes accordingly. So this acts as an extra set of eyes and ears and being able to understand, like, are there other things I could or should be doing with some of the code I'm working on to be able to make it better, more bug-free, more performant, all of those things. So I guess I'll throw it over you to David. Like, when you've used that, like, are there any particular highlights or types of recommendations that you think have been most useful to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really neat here is depending on the language and the platform that you're using, and how this kind of ties together to our PR agent too. So PR agent will do these kind of same kind of best practices and checks. And where if you miss it here, or if you don't catch yourself and say, hey, I'm going to do a suggest, you'll see that in PR agent too. It's like SQL injection, or I actually was writing some code and I was going to get back to this method and I forgot to implement the method. And so I had like a -1, and I just kept it in because I was like, well, this is a great explanation. Is like, hey, look, you forgot to implement this. Obviously, you're not going to have this method and have a, a -1 being returned all the time, a magic number kind of thing. So, that's a neat one too. So it comes up with a lot of good suggestions and helping you out in doing that. It just depends on your language and what your use case is.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I think, and thank you for the plug, by the way. We're going to be talking about PR agent in just a moment. I think the idea is PR agent's also going to kind of review this code, add comments, make reviewing easier. And I think the idea behind being able to run this /improve command here in the IDE is basically maybe catching things before it gets to the PR review phase. And maybe being able to kind of save everybody some time and effort and whatnot, and trying to kind of review that and try to, I guess, fix it after the fact. Um, the other thing that I would just note real quick, and then David, after I'm done talking about, I guess, testing is the next part and a really big highlight, is really kind of going through some of these questions that we've had so far, and seeing if there's anything that we want to tackle before we dive in and talk about PR agent.
Well,
Um,
there was a couple. One I liked was does it write COBOL for us? And I think that's kind of like a where I would say is I use someone's term is a table stakes now, as everyone knows, probably in large language models. So we don't necessarily going to write unit tests or quality because we're very focused on the quality of your code and the integrity of it, not just writing some code. But just like anything else, you can go ahead and ask through, our Codium mate chat to write some COBOL for you. You can actually give it some COBOL too and have it to be translated into Java, and it'll actually come out with that code and write that. It's just not necessarily where we're um, really focused in on the framework of actually inserting in or doing the tests and the whole complete picture, should I say, of that when it comes to COBOL.
Absolutely. And I think the key here is
But
that
I saw that one, so I think I answered that. And then, yeah, and you're showing that. Um, Obviously, we don't have a COBOL interpreter running right now. And I'm getting flashbacks. So there was a couple more for test cases and TDD and writing a unit case. So if you wanted to, I could go ahead and go ahead and share my screen and create a Java class real quick and show a quick calculator and do a test-driven development if you wanted to do that. That'll answer a couple of the questions out
Yeah,
there.
yeah. You know what? Go ahead and get that running. Let me kind of show the basics to the test suite first, and then kind of show like a workflow in doing
Okay.
TDD. I think that would be great, a great pairing. So I guess what we want to talk about then is real quick. I think one of the highlights for a lot of our customers is the ability to be able to generate tests. Now, you've probably used like ChatGPT, GitHub Copilot, other tools like that to generate tests. I think what you're going to see here is rather than just kind of spitting out some tests at you, what we do is we actually give an entire user experience around being able to generate what is called a test suite. And so if I go ahead and enter here, it brings up a whole panel on the right side. And what it's doing behind the scenes right now, as we speak, is it's actually generating the behaviors coverage. So this is not just a single like single command or API call to an LLM that, or an inference to an LLM that says like, hey, give me some tests. What it's doing is it's first going through and using, analyzing the code to understand all the different test cases or behavior coverage that should be included. And so now that it's gone through and kind of discerned like, okay, yeah, we're going to need to make sure the API connection is successful. And then we've got edge cases down here about certain scenarios that need to make sure that we test for. And even within these, I expand this out and I get related sub behaviors that maybe I should be generating tests for. It's really, really robust and helping me where I can now go down the list and go, yes, that's a good test. Yes, that's a good test. Yes, I need that. And be able to then, and then all of those tests will appear down below. And then these tests, I can copy them to my clipboard. I actually can copy all the tests to my clipboard if I want to, or open them up as a file. The other part of this is like, if I do get a test for some reason that doesn't really meet my needs as much as I'd like it to, I can actually edit the test right in line. I can go ahead and change these variables. I can go ahead and I can prompt it. I could say, indicate what I want to change, and it will regenerate that accordingly. But here's the thing. A lot of the things that maybe we want to do to improve tests are sometimes themes. They're trends. Like an example, I had a customer I was working with where they were trying to generate integration tests. And internally, when they generate integration tests, it uses a certain API endpoint that, frankly, our product just would not know. And so what they were able to do is actually go into the configuration here and paste examples of what a good test looks like. So once you've shown us what good tests look like, you can paste as many as you want into here. We use that as context to kind of generate the types of tests that you would want to see. And it helps greatly with the accuracy of the tests. You also have the ability to include additional instructions that you would like to see as part of the test generation. And then last but not least, the testing framework. So in the case of the gentleman or woman who mentioned earlier, like you wanted to say see JUnit tests. Well, if you were using Java, down here in the testing framework, you would actually see JUnit listed as a testing framework, and you'd have the ability to be able to customize that. The last part, and then I'll turn it over to David, is that all of these options can be turned into a configuration file that you can save. In fact, you can create a new config file, and then you could actually include that config file. Say that you've played around with the configuration, it's generating great tests for you with minimal amount of alteration. Then what you could do is save that as a file to not only use for the future, but you could actually include it in the project repo. So now that your other engineers, your colleagues who also use CodiumAI to generate tests will have that same configuration in place so that they can take advantage of the hard work that you put into this. And so that is test generation in a nutshell.
Can I
Again,
can I hit on
sure.
one more thing on that, Jonathan?
Oh yeah,
So
absolutely.
not only can you actually share that by checking it in, we have the concept of the Codium. You can see it there. The important message is the CodiumAI.local, and this is by convention, but we have the .local that overwrites the CodiumAI.toml file. So if you have something local, you would put that in your git ignore. So say that someone said, hey, across all your projects or this project, we want 20 test cases being generated. And you're like, man, I really just want 5. You can do this local one on yours and you can overwrite that. So you don't have that waiting for 20 of them, or if you have something custom. So I really like that feature. So you can tweak it that much.
Agreed. Agreed. I've recently spoke with some engineering leaders as well who really like the idea of having more consistency among test generation in some of their organizations, and so this is also another way to kind of achieve that. Are you ready for me to stop sharing my screen?
Sure.
All right, I'll let you share and talk a little bit briefly about kind of how you would use what I shared in kind of like a more of a test-driven development scenario.
Yeah. So I got to make sure that I'm going to be sharing the right Codium, the right IntelliJ, because the screen is just not right. So I don't think that that's the right one. Let me see. I should just have a basic calculator. There we go. Price calculator. Let's see if that'll see it. Does everyone see it? Yep, there we go.
That looks good.
Cool. So I'm doing this to so we can have a very clear cut understanding of the TDD. So please, again, I call this an enhanced TDD. So what I'm doing here is that I don't have anything yet written except the basic method. So in your TDD, you write the test first and you have it fail. And that's the one difference here, is that I don't have a test yet because I have nothing to reference. So that's what we need, is at least a skeleton. So you write the code, and so depending on who you are and in your test-driven development, some people would say, hey, you're not TDD because of that. So I will call out that if you want to be a purist, if there is such a thing for TDD, then yes, we had to write the method. Now, I didn't write any kind of instructions for this. So as more complicated as you get, you would have to help your model, or you would want to help your CodiumAI test in being able to generate. But right now, just having the ad and the context, it's able to understand enough to come up with the scenarios and the tests to be written. So you can see that I'm just like Jonathan was showing, I'll just hit here. I said, I want JUnit 5 and I want 12. So you saw that he was were you using PyTest, I think it's
Yeah, I was
called,
using PyTest in my
for
case. Yep.
Python? Yeah, PyTest. So here we're using JUnit 5. We do 4, we do TestNG and Spock, which is my favorite one, is Spock. But right now, this is just for JUnit. So I have the class and I have the tests. What I like about this is I have happy paths, I have edge cases, and general behavior. I don't know how much of what you guys have done when you're doing your TDD, but trying to think of all the different scenarios and all the different edge cases and stuff, and then coming up with them and writing that tests too. You don't have to do that now. You have your pair programmer. So your CodiumAI buddy here is going to help you out with these. So I can go ahead now and just what I like to do, and everyone's a little bit different, but you're in the driver's seat. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, there we go. So I'm just going to go ahead and add this and just have the tool add me that file. Now, for some reason, the tool decided not to put it in the right package for me. But now, in your scenario can do that. Now, I actually have another thing that wants to try to add that into me right now, because I have another tool on too. So let me go ahead and add JUnit to the class path. And now we can go ahead and import the class. And we'll get the basic calculator. And this should just be doing it for me. So I'm wondering why it's not. Oh, okay, basic calculator. And I should have it. And just like before in demos, let me just go right here, because I don't have the class path set right. So let me do this, and because I've already downloaded it, I just need to copy that jar to my class path. And now hopefully that will move it, but it did not move it into my right jar. There we go. So we should be good to go now, if the IDE is going to be nice to me.
Which, by the way, those of you might notice that he happens to not only be using Java, but he's also using IntelliJ, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So like just to kind of show you guys that the JetBrains experience, if you haven't played with the product yet, is very similar to the experience that you would see in VS Code, or what I was showing you earlier. So they're pretty synonymous, as an example of that.
Yes. And now this should, okay. Yeah, I don't need that. It doesn't matter, but yeah, for some reason now it's happening. Now it's working. That's what I get for trying to do this on the fly. But there we go. So we actually have this running, and this is one of the tests. So I can go ahead and run this, and just like test-driven development, that's what you want, because it's going to fail. We celebrate that in TDD. So I'm celebrating that and saying, hey, that's bad. Well, not bad, that's good. what should I say? Because I don't have anything implemented yet. It's still returning 0. So I can keep on going with my test driven development. I can look at this and say, okay, this seems reasonable too. I want to assert that when I add these two negative numbers, that I get a negative result. And you can keep on going like this. So I can keep on adding and reviewing these. Again, I want to really encourage that we're not trying to say, hey, just push buttons now. You're still in the driver's seat. You need to read and look at these, but it allows you to do this. So I can go ahead and run a lot of all of these different ones and see them all failing like we expect. So I have all of the different failures and expected outcomes that we would actually think we should get. And now the beautiful thing about this now is I can come back here and I can implement this myself. But think if this was a little bit more complex and you wanted to do some stuff here, I can actually go to CodiumAI chat and I have the basic calculator and I can actually add extra context. So I have my company's code base, but I can actually add this test as extra context. So if I go here and say add files or folders, I have that test out there. So I'm putting that in my context. And now I can just simply select this portion, 5 through 7, and say implement. I'll say implement the method, but a lot of times you can just say implement. And now I can go ahead and implement this, and CodiumAI's thinking a little bit. It's using the context that I gave it to, so that unit tests there, and there we go. So it's just doing the basic, but it's more to get the actual point across that you can do this and you can actually have it help you implement your code. So now we can go ahead and run our unit tests and we see we have all green now. So everything's passed. So that's what I said, that it's an enhanced TDD. But again, I can't stress enough that this is a very basic example, but you need to be in the driver's seat still, and don't go blindly follow into the code is what I would say, which that's the way we've been all the time. You've had Stack Overflow or you've had Google, you have other things that'll give you suggestions. You still need to know what you're doing and understand it some. So I stopped sharing there. It's time for back to you, Jonathan.
Perfect. So let me go ahead and wrap up then and talking a bit about PR agent, and then we'll make sure that we didn't miss any lingering questions. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to flip back over to my browser here for a moment, and I am going to show an example of PR agent. So this is an example of a PR that was submitted, and what it does is, first off, the idea here is it will take, for example, this is what was submitted as the PR description. What we do is we come over the top of that and we provide additional commenting to be able to help out the PR reviewer as well as the person who submitted the PR. The first part about this, I mean, if you think about like what happens when you're trying to review a PR normally, it usually involves coming in and looking at files changed, right? And you're trying to understand a bit more about what's going on here. Why were these changes made? Are these changes going to have any sort of adverse impact that I should be exploring, and so forth? What we do is make this experience extremely easier. The first part is the changes walkthrough. So what we do is we give a file by file breakdown and kind of put in layman's terms what this file change was about. It added support for certain types of tokens. It refactored certain parts of this. It kind of gives you that kind of high level view of what this is about, and then you can click on this to look at the diff, right? So it really helps you to be able to kind of get through a PR much more quickly with kind of that important, helpful context on what these changes are about. Now, the next part about this is really kind of where we start getting a little bit more intensive in our analysis. This is where we start to take a look at the PR and give you like an estimated effort or review, a scale from 1 to 5. 5 being this takes a lot of effort because there was a bucket load of changes. Maybe there's other impacts that need to be explored, or 1 being, hey, someone came in and maybe changed like a couple of doc strings or a logging message or something, right? So as part of this, then we also help the PR reviewer to understand, were there relevant tests? I mean, hopefully after what David and I showed you, like you'll be able to more easily generate tests and make sure that there are tests associated with your PRs. That if there are any security concerns, we'll highlight them. And then also if there's potential bugs, code duplication, other issues, like we really want to surface those earlier so that they don't get overlooked. In fact, some of our customers who have evaluated our product have actually gone back to previous PRs that were known to have introduced bugs or incidents or otherwise, and actually run our product against it to see if we would have discovered the issue before it got released. And the answer is yes. Um, the other part of this is we also give a variety of other code suggestions. So if you remember earlier, we showed you the /improve command in the IDE. This is very similar. What it's doing is reviewing the code that's been changed and giving you a list of suggestions that are sorted by score. So the top of the list here would be kind of your most important code suggestions. And this also gets more in depth than the previous suggestions. So you're going to see that will actually take you exactly to the lines of code. We'll show you exactly what we would change. As an example of this that I saw a few weeks ago now, potential null pointer exception scenario. And we recommend changing the code, and they were able to actually take the code as it was shown here and apply that in a new commit to be able to remove that sort of risk from the PR. And so that's kind of a PR agent in a nutshell. There's one other thing I want to show you though, which is if we go back over to files changed, a new feature that we added in. We have a Chrome extension, by the way, for this. If we go into files changed, there's a Chrome extension available that will actually allow you to chat about the PR right here. So if you did, for some reason, for example, you didn't want comments on the PR, I had one person mention like, I don't know, I feel like that would be too noisy. Fine. You can actually just come in here and say like, outline the changes to this PR. Or examples that you might see from earlier, like what are the potential risks introduced by this PR? And it will kind of break down things that you might want to explore or look at. And this is private to you. You're just this is all run locally on your browser, and you can use this as a way to kind of not only find issues, but maybe even ask it like, hey, how could I change XYZ code to prevent this issue? And it will help you with that. So the idea is having that chat right there as you're reviewing the PR to also act as a way to be able to help you. The last thing I'll note, and then I'll be curious, David, is there any other commentary from your end that you think maybe I overlooked, would be the configurability. So behind the scenes, you can't see this here, but there's configuration files that can be done globally or at a per repo level that allow you to be able to customize this. So for example, down here where we're providing PR code suggestions, you can actually customize it. Say like, okay, never give me more than 2 suggestions, or only give me suggestions that are above a certain score threshold, or maybe just type out like, don't give me recommendations that pertain to logging messages. I had a customer recently where they had a really weird scenario in this particular repo where they had the number 10 as a string. And we flagged that within our product and said, you should probably convert that to an integer. But for some reason in their code, the string 10 was actually accurate. It was considered good. And they wanted to instruct it like, hey, just ignore cases like this in the future. They had the ability to be able to do that. So that's PR agent in a nutshell. David, anything else that comes to mind that maybe I neglected, or any questions you see popping up?
Well, so it's key that you asked a question, and I'm sorry I was in the Q&A. I'll be honest. I was answering a
That's
Q&A.
fine.
So my screen got blocked. And so I wanted to know, did you do the private chat?
I did do the private chat.
Okay,
Yes.
good. Because I wanted to just hit on that. The one thing I was trying to listen, I didn't hear was, remember the private chat, or for everyone on here, private chat does not actually add it as a comment. So as you're doing this, you're private and it's only between you and PR agent. And that's a big thing. So if you're a manager or even a reviewer and you're like, man, I don't know what library they're using. What is this? You can actually go and ask it. And there's two things. You're not putting another comment, which would hit the original PR person to open up the request. They're saying, why are you asking this? You could just put it in here and you're not giving noise to the developer who did the PR. It's just coming back in. So that's what I like the beauty of this is we're lowering the noise canceling ratio. We're lowering that by giving you this ability to ask these questions without having to do the /improve or /ask on the PR. You can still do the /ask if you think it's a poignant question you want to keep documented in the PR. I would highly recommend doing that. So you're like, hey, I want to ask this. I want PR agents answer and everyone to see it. Then do /ask. But if you just want yourself or not call yourself out saying, I don't know what I'm doing kind of thing, which I do a lot, go right ahead and use this one.
Now, I happen to be doing this with GitHub at the moment. I do know that PR Agent generally supports like Bitbucket, it supports Azure DevOps, it supports GitLab. Do you know if the extension here also supports those types of Git providers?
You
I don't know
just
off
caught
the
me.
top of my
You
head.
caught me with one I don't know.
I didn't know either. I'm caught. I'm
Yeah.
caught flat-footed here. I don't know the answer to that. I apologize to whoever asked that. Like that's something that I guess you could test out. You could download the Chrome extension and try it out with PR Agent, or you can reach out to us and we can give you an answer. Especially if you're considering evaluating, we'd love to be able to help get that answer for you.
And
Um,
Dennis, I think it's Dennis, Denis. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Asked a really good question saying, hey, the PR description, is it automatically there? Can you include it? Does it have to be added? And that's a big segue, or if we didn't set this, is there's a global configuration that you can set for all of your repositories in that product like GitHub or Bitbucket. And then there's a one per your repository. So it is highly configurable. So the answer is yes, you can have describe, or you can say no, you don't want describe to happen right away. It's up to you.
Yeah, so as an example of this actually ties to another question, which is more about the customizability of this too. Is like first off, kind of like with PR with CodiumAI, there's different commands that can be run. So there's a describe command, there's a review command, there's an improve command, and under each of those, I mean, I'm not going to go into every one of these, but like there's a variety of configuration options. All of these are documented and whatnot for you. And then also, you have the ability to indicate when a PR is created, which of those commands do you want to run automatically, right? You always have the ability to run a command ad hoc and write a / command as a comment. We'll pick up on it and we'll come in and add our own commentary based on your command. But the idea is that these commands can be run automatically, and you can indicate those here. And then likewise, you can go through, and there's a large variety of the types of, I guess, configurations that can be offered. The example I used earlier with the improve command is how many suggestions you want to see or what the score threshold might be. But there's a huge amount of additional ones. Probably one of the most popular ones, though, for every command is the extra instructions. This is where you can kind of just in plain English indicate like how you want the recommendations to be, things you want to see more of, less of, or otherwise. You can provide that sort of extra instructions on pretty much every type of command. But the idea is out of the box. These are the three that we usually focus on, but there's even more commands that weren't shown. There's other ones that can help with analysis, for deeper analysis of the PRs and so forth. But the idea was kind of give you a nice sampling to understand what the potential might be.
And one way you can go fish on your own is if you went back to the CodiumAI, or if you CodiumAI, if you go back to the actual tool, the Chrome extension, and if you go down in actually on where you
Oh
the
yeah.
code, so not
Yep,
here for
yep.
the private
I
chat.
know what you're talking about. This right here, the
So
Chrome extension
yeah, this
also
is
has
the,
those.
oh, go right ahead. Well,
I was gonna
you go all
say,
the way down to, yeah, right there. So if you click on something, you go to add. So click on like describe, and
okay.
you can add or review and add something like extra instructions. and whatever you need, just click on extra. If you see export as config, what's nice about this is now you don't have to go read the docs. Just go click on export as config over on the right. And now you have that to copy and put it in your config to be used the next time. So it's kind of a nice, how do I do this one? What's the syntax for that in the TOML file? You don't need to go look it up. You can just use this Chromium extension and you can cheat that way.
Awesome. And so again, and the idea behind this is while we run you can select certain commands to run automatically, you can always run these commands on an ad hoc basis, kind of whenever you so choose, and that will go ahead and generate new content in the PR from our solution. I'm getting another question about, will it support Java projects? Yep, absolutely. We do support Java projects. Java, in fact, we support pretty much every major language that you can imagine, those top like 10 or 15. So I think that like you're probably going to be pleasantly surprised. The COBOL one was probably the trickiest one I've received. Maybe someone hasn't asked me if we support Pascal, but in general, the idea is that the models we use have been trained on pretty much all the popular languages out there. So what are we missing? Anything else? I'm skimming through the questions.
Yeah, I'm trying to look. There was a good one in there. That one's done. So someone was for this. I think it's going to take a little bit longer, but Rahul, if you want to, please reach out to Jonathan or someone at Codium or Codium AI, and we can schedule a demo for you to get more in depth on the different kind of questions that you have. So I see you want to see a more Mockito. I will tell you that we do support Mockito with JUnit 5 and JUnit 4, and be able to generate those classes and the mocks for that. And then let me see if there's another one. There was one and I kind of missed it now.
There was a comment here about, do I just stick in a coding style guide.md to my repository and hope that everyone will remember to include it as context? I will say not only could you do that, but again, context is one of our strengths. The other, as I mentioned much earlier, like in our enterprise offering, we do allow the ability to actually just more broadly index your repositories and store those in a database on your network, and then be able to do and to be able to use that. And so that would be another option, so that even if they don't select it as context, using semantic indexing, we could basically kind of see that would be a top kind of thing to include in context to the LLM, and that would be also another way to be able to achieve that. So another thing that you could consider.
And I think we did answer. I just saw that question for Dennis, but I believe we did answer that by showing the actual Chromium extension and doing the configuration to get more in depth in your configurations. So I'll go ahead and say yes to that answer.
And then the last question of the day, we are out of time, but we'll take it, is Victor. Do you want to take that one, David?
How the variable names, design patterns, and other architectural references should be. Yes, and this is more in our paid, and I would say that this reaches out to our golden repos. So we have a way that we have a proprietary RAG that we do, and that you can point the Codiumate to point to your company's golden repos. And in there, that's where you would show what's your best practices. So I always like to think of it, every company has their own logger and doing some kind of logging, and they extend it in some proper way that they want to do it and use it. Well, you don't want someone to just say, hey, how do I do logging, or how do I add logging here? Or if you're getting a Java or getting any kind of code and it's going to do a logging for you because you give instructions, say, hey, I want to log out to see this data. and it'll use a basic logger because it's going to go to LLM and it would get that answer. But if you have a golden repo, it's actually going to see what is the logger, and if there's examples of best practices of using a logger for that golden repo, you'll get back that logger that's what your company uses. So say it's the, whatever, the Acme logger implementation that you have in your golden repo, it's going to grab that one and use it. I hope I answered that.
The last thing that I just note real quick, then there is a get started link up here, or not really a link, more of a URL. You can go to our website. We have a 14-day trial baked in. I do have someone asking about basically AppSec, InfoSec, and like what would they need? What kind of data do we need in order to kind of do this? I mean, that's going to be an important question. We do have a if you go to trust.codium.ai, we do have a kind of a trust center there. You can sign an NDA and get any sort of documentation you need about the security of our product, and we can also talk about those things more fully. My email address, just for the record, is jonathan.k@CodiumAI. So if any of you want to reach out with questions or whatnot that you weren't able to get today, or that or InfoSec type questions and so forth, hit me up. I'm happy to be able to help you out. This is the sort of stuff I do on a regular basis. Otherwise, this will be I think you guys will be notified when the recording goes live. Worst case, if you monitor our YouTube channel, if you go to the CodiumAI YouTube channel, you should see it show up there probably within the next 24 hours or so, and you can share that with all your friends and family, because I'm sure your grandma would love to read this or see this video. So anyway, thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I hope to hear from each of you.